Greetings. It's Friday afternoon and we're floating into the weekend. It's been quite a week through the United States of America as there's been a major issue as the gentleman named Brett Kavanaugh, a distinguished judge in the U.S. federal court system, has been nominated by President Donald Trump to be the next justice of the Supreme Court. And there has been quite a controversy about that, up and down and back and forth with a number of charges. It appeared that yesterday, after a very trying day of charges and countercharges and explanations, and then here is where we are at. And after that, the decision was made that on this Friday morning, the vote would be made, and then it would move ahead based on that. And then shortly next week, the judge would have his proverbial day in the Senate court, and they would decide to confirm or not confirm him as the next justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. But the catastrophe continues. And you know, life is, in many cases, full of catastrophes. And I've learned something from not only my own experience of catastrophes, but from some wise teachers. And today, I'd just like to share with you something that came across the transom to me this week, in which a gentleman, a leader, a pastor, has put forth some ideas that, just from the stories of the Hobbit, we might learn something about what can happen when life brings us, as it inevitably will from time to time, a catastrophe. Let's just take a little time this weekend to see if perhaps we can learn something about maybe Judge Kavanaugh, the catastrophe, and you and me. And the program, the conversation, begins right now. There are a lot of interesting words for it. Someone said that, life is like a stage, it's like a drama, and that's true. And guess what's going to happen? All of a sudden, you're going to have a lot of plot twists. Oh my goodness, something in the story you didn't expect, it twists. Oftentimes I say, adversity, it's part of the plan. Scott Peck, in his famous book, The Road Less Traveled, began with the simple expression, the very first words of the book: life is difficult. And one of the things that we just have to continually deal with is that, in many ways, it is true that the world is not our home. This isn't really our final place in space. And that in this place in space called planet Earth, things will be difficult. You will have troubles. And those are things we just don't like to hear. We hear them, and sometimes when we experience them, we just don't understand that there is far greater possibility of that happening. And if we are graced and good fortune hits our way, that we have those in minimal amounts, we are graced indeed. And we press on. So that's part of what's happening to Brett Kavanaugh. And I'm not going to get into any of the arguments about it. I just know that the way it was handled, no matter what, was incredibly unfair. And if he's not guilty of any of those things, and I tend to suspect that he's not, understanding the story, but I don't want to say for sure, then it is the greatest catastrophe in many ways, particularly for a man. And it's one of the things I would fear the most, because I came very close to someone who didn't have good intentions, someone who was seeking to do something like that to me. One of the things we teach is what we call the J principle. And it's simply this, is you will have some J experiences. Job. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden, why did that happen to him? Job. Jonah. Well, he was scared and he ran away and he didn't want to do what he thought God wanted him to do, but hey, they blamed him for the storm, threw him overboard. He lands up in the belly of the beast and lands up, as I say, on the beach, face down, wondering what's going to happen to me. And actually, Jesus said that one of the signs of the times will be the sign of Jonah. What does that mean? Think about that. So we have Job, we have Jonah, and we have Judas. Why in the world, knowing what he did Jesus, there's the other J word, why did Jesus choose Judas? Well, I have a long story teaching on that, but it's to help us remind ourselves that even the very Son of Man, the Son of God, Jesus himself, went through the catastrophe of being betrayed. Yep, it happened. The B word, betrayal. So kind of just let that sit on your head for a while as a part of our conversation and see what you come up with. But in particular, one of the things I appreciate about having the ability to work with many entrepreneurs is that I find that some of the best of them are really interesting people. Not only interesting in their work and in the building of businesses, but they're just interesting people. They have lots of interest. They truly are Renaissance people. They have a variety of interests. And some of them are very wide and wonderful interests. And so the idea of getting, some lessons from the literature of JRR Tolkien, the creator of the Hobbits. Could there actually be some lessons for life and business that we can learn as Christian entrepreneurs from the man who gave us the Hobbits? Well, this was a fun story, and so I give full attribution to the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics. Hugh Welchel gives leadership to that organization, and many good people there, Art Lindsay, Kristen Brown, Anna Arnold, and they put it together. And there was a wonderful article by John Pletcher, which appeared just this week. And it was called Monday Motivation, and obviously we'll be coming on to Monday, from JRR Tolkien. Here's how it goes. I'm not uproariously excited about going back to work most Mondays, and I know I'm not alone. We might take heart today by pondering one rather quirky word unique to J.R.R. Tolkien. Here we go. Before we consider this motivating word, it is important to grasp an oft-overlooked fact. The maker of hobbits, rings, and other Middle-earth things held a high and holy view of work. Tolkien passionately espoused core truths as presented in Genesis 1. Such truths include God as creator and humans as sub-creators. Principle 3 in the Christian Entrepreneur Handbook is we are made to create things. Now, these faith foundations permeated Tolkien's own literary work. He said fans are readily familiar with The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. The lesser-known, albeit important backstory for all of Middle-earth, the Silmarillion, is just this. So robust was Tolkien's perspective on creative work, his leading cast of characters in the Silmarillion included a grand foreman, the leader and teacher of all things commonly laborious. The work of Middlemarch was not some willy-nilly random activity. Instead, there was divine intentionality. It is also clear in the way he describes the work in his stories that Tolkien was devoted to excellence and integrity in his craft. So, of course, he created his own craft into his stories. For example, some of the elves were described as delighting in tongues and in scripts. He made certain that brilliant teachers and wordsmiths were included in Middle-earth. How about some words with transcendent meaning? Tolkien readers are indeed very fond of the good professor's creative making of words. Grounded in the color familiarity of our own wonder-filled earth, he infused Middle-earth with hairy-footed hobbits, merry-singing elves, fiery rings, dastardly dragons, courageous dwarfs, and all kinds of shire things. Remember that? One word stands tall in the greater backstory. Tolkien's inventive term, eucatastrophe. Eucatastrophe is physically and philosophically and spiritually foundational. Originally developed with his famous essay on fairy stories, the term combines the familiar word catastrophe and something else. You combine that, which means a downward turn in one's life condition and feelings. Yes, a catastrophe. And the original term, Greek term for gospel, is translated as good news. From this same prefix, many Tolkien stories, scenes reveal characters discovering a good turn in their perspective, a lifting of the heart that can emerge in the midst of cataclysmic events. Even amid catastrophe, characters might encounter hope and joy. Tolkien viewed this wonderful concept as applicable for our history, not just Middle-earth. He uniquely saw it as intrinsic to what he believed about God's overarching grand story. In his essay, he declared, the resurrection is the eucatastrophe of the story of the Incarnation. The story begins and ends in joy. And on a back-to-work Monday, we might smirk and say, "That sounds mighty fine, Professor Tolkien, when you enjoy singing about resurrection hope on Sunday, but I am desperately dreading my Monday through Friday." Why? We are all too familiar with catastrophes at work. They can include a nasty, inconsiderate coworker, a grumbly client, that diabolical stack of paperwork to slog through, whole person exhaustion, or a sudden market downturn. And there are many, many others deeper and more dreadful than that. How about taking Tolkien's brilliant word into your work week? We can choose to watch for eucatastrophe. Again, it's kind of spelled eucatastrophe. Perhaps that extra challenging situation might prompt you to discover a creative solution. Maybe the conflict with a coworker can actually lead to more effective communication skills. What if the complex staff meeting forces your team to work more closely and forge stronger work bonds? It might be that your current catastrophe leads you to look to God and rely on someone other than yourself. Are you due to grow some greater tenacity? Perhaps your own heart and character could encounter resurrection out of the dark tomb of your workplace catastrophe. Tolkien's tales deliberately set workers in realms. In the realm of the king, the wizard Gandalf announced to King Aragorn, "This is your realm, and the heart of the greater realm that shall be. It is your task to order its beginnings and to preserve what may be preserved." Wise old Gandalf was assigning workplace influence to humans, transitioning leadership to the dominion of men. I love this stuff. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Preacher. Thank you, Pastor. May we all work in such a way that we order and preserve in our realms today with an anticipating eye, eager to look up in the midst of every downturn. Yeah, in the midst of every catastrophe, whether we are wordsmiths or silversmiths, may we, like Tolkien, seek to take our gifts at work and intentionally and in great intentionality and excellence for the glory of our creative God. May we experience fresh motivation with the wonder of your catastrophe. Your catastrophe. And as I often said on late night radio, I'll say it again. In the midst of our catastrophe, in the midst of all the things that come to us, we have a touch of wisdom, and maybe we should just let it sit on our head for a while, stir our mind, and then sink to our heart. I'm Stan Houston. This is truly Radio on the Edge. This is the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience, a radio conversation, just you and me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And we'll be right back. Well, I pray for all involved, particularly Brett Kavanaugh and his family, as he is truly going through a Kavanaugh catastrophe. And thanks for these words of encouragement from John Pletcher. Dr. John Elton Pletcher is lead pastor at Manor Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he regularly teaches theology of work, and he leads in faith-work integration. And I really appreciate it. And he's going to come forward with a forthcoming book called Wandering in Tolkien's Wonder. There's a real www, Wandering in Tolkien's Wonder. You know what? We're going to have John Pletcher on the Jesus Entrepreneur Experience, and he can talk a little bit more about the power of that particular God-inspired, Jesus-led fiction to help us to better live and live well in the everyday, Monday through Friday and Saturday, Sunday, workplace and world that we live in. Jesus wants us to flourish in the midst of the mess. He truly wants the catastrophes to become, as the good pastor reminds us, eucatastrophes, something that educates us, something good that comes out of that. And the hope of the resurrection, in fact, the very meaning of the resurrection, is that out of the sometimes Judas-inspired betrayals, out of the catastrophes that come to us, that more than that, not only can good come to us, but in some significant ways, God can come and teach us and perhaps transform us. And in doing that, He will bless us more and more. All the best and blessings. I'm Stan Houston. You can reach me at radioedge77 at gmail.com, radioedge77 at gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from you. Enjoy the weekend. Make sure you take time to worship, and we'll see you around next week. Best and blessings, and bye for now.